Okay, welcome to the CoScreen Conversation Series. We'll be chatting with prominent people in the technology space. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Timothy Chen, who's an engineer or founding engineer at Grid AI and prolific advisor and investor to early stage startups, and as well as being a thought leader in remote collaboration. Would you like to give some of your background?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm super excited to be part of this conversation. So a little bit of my background. I was a founder as well, started a startup that my company was also remote. I have a team in Taiwan and a team here in the US. And after we joined Cloudera, the whole team is basically also remote as well. And I was SVP engineering at Cosmos, which we also have a fully distributed team. So I had a little bit of a different taste of how remote kind of works and smallest company, a little larger company, and sort of in this little between startups as well.
So you've been working remote like long before COVID, is what you're saying? Is that
basically? Yeah. I actually was working.
Has it mostly been remote? Like for how long?
Not really. I was in the office, like for Cloudera, I was in the office, and I moved back to Seattle. I was kind of become remote. Cloudera after the merger was more open to being remote, actually. So it's kind of a different culture. So I have both, I guess. I was remote for quite some of my stints, and then fully in the office at early stage startup. Like Mesosphere was a full in-office team. I was there every single day. So I was one of the earliest employees at Mesosphere too. So I kind of seen how it works on both sides. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. So I'm Jason Thomas, CTO and co-founder of CoScreen. And just to give you my background, but thank you for taking the time to join us today, Tim. So I want to start with this session about just asking you about how Grid AI effectively builds and manages a remote team.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be interesting because Grid AI is pretty small, right?
Right.
And I was there less than 10 people, and so. Like most company, when you start with 5 to 10 people, you don't start with a very structured way, right?
Right.
You basically start in any way in a very unstructured, let's all in one Slack channel, let's just all talk, whatever. There's not much processes. We just need to go figure out stuff.
Right.
So we're kind of be forced to be remote, actually. When I joined originally around March or so, the team was actually planned to be a full in-office company in New York, and they already rented out the office space. And COVID hits. Everybody couldn't even get to the office at all. So everyone flew out of New York. They couldn't even be there. So we've been forced to be a remote team.
Was everyone in New York? Was like all the employees were in New York, and it was just going to all be in the office there?
Yeah. And I was going to be the oddball.
Right.
And then
you're going to be the one remote resource.
Yeah,
I've done that before in my career too, and it's not fun. But
it's a fun company to be part of. So I thought, could try this out. But yeah, eventually become by accident a fully distributed company. So I'll say, like it really kind of a bunch of experiments, because I think none of the teams really, or none of the team members have done a lot of remotes in Grid AI. So we just kind of been playing around, like, hey, what is the cadence of checking in, right? What do we talk about? How do we get designs together? How do we do anything, make progress? So how often should we chat? How often should we not chat? How many meetings
How do you know when it's not working? How do you know that you've gone down the wrong path and then suddenly realize, like, hey, we're not chatting often enough, or we're not doing this or that often enough?
Yeah. Especially in very early stage startup, you don't really have anything planned out that long.
Right.
We have an idea. We kind of have something.
You have nothing to compare to, though. So it's like, you have things to compare to throughout your career, but you may not be able to know that you've gone down the wrong path,
Yeah.
Or that things just aren't working.
Yeah. And it may not be a remote problem, right? And so I think, just kind of to get to your points, we just tried different things. We tried eventually just different Zoom calls during the days, more synchronous. We tried to more synchronous remotes. And I think that actually is not bad when you're a really small company, really small team.
That's kind of different than what GitLab's recommending, right? Because they want everything to be asynchronous, right? And they maybe very small amounts of synchronous collaboration. So, but you're saying that you guys have tried to have more synchronous collaboration, kind of ad hoc or like
ad hoc. Yeah, not a planned thing. Basically, pair multiple times whenever needed.
Right.
Ready to jump on a call multiple times, whatever needed. Because at early, it's just so messy, right? Our product is undefined. We have random problems, random questions, random customers that need something. And since we're all remote, it's just video calls of video calls. And so I think it actually is not that bad. You should definitely, you're forced to do it. And it's probably the right thing to do at the earliest stage in a startup if you want to still be on the same page, right? Even though you're in different places. And
could you be more like detailed about like what is it that your team does and like how is it that they use this sort of remote tech to collaborate? You kind of mentioned a minute ago like pairing, for instance, and like
so Grid AI, we're still stealth, so I can't really talk about too much of the product.
Sure.
But Grid AI is behind this open source project called Pytorch Lightning.
Okay.
So Pytorch Lightning is a framework on top of Pytorch. So Pytorch is a very famous deep learning framework, and Pytorch Lightning allows people to build PyTorch programs in a more composable way. So it allows you to actually do object-oriented programming on top of PyTorch. It's maybe one way to kind of describe it. So easier way to kind of experiments, basically. So we're the company behind it, so we're going to build a product around it as well. So that's kind of where we are, and we're,
is it in public beta, private beta? Is it still just in development mode?
Private stuff. Yeah.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah, and so when it comes to like our develop team, like we have the Pytorch Lightning team that works on the open source side, and of course I'm part of the team that works on the product side. And so that it's you have the open source projects already out there, right? And you can work on that on public. We're going to try to do a bunch of experiments and iterations and a lot of things to kind of figure out what is the product will be and stuff like that. But that is you're kind of forced to do a bit more synchronous because it's really hard to do truly asynchronous when you have a lot of discussions you need every day.
Because you're making this like fundamental framework, but like how are you testing it? Like how are you I mean, I'm assuming you're writing some ML, like experimental ML systems using it, and then using this PyTorch Lightning or whatever, right, to basically make something comparable to something that you would make using the open source project, and then sort of comparing those two things to see if it's faster, I guess, to do it with with this different method. But and like it's you can basically you're trying out different things. You're testing a hypothesis. Like any startup at this earliest stage, you're just testing one version to another version, testing with your users, testing potential customers. You're talking to people. You're doing debriefs together. Trying to just figure out like what is the right thing to do. So remotely that like you have to kind of build, I would imagine, more connections to your customers remotely in order to know what's working and what isn't.
Yeah. So we actually build out like a Notion table.
Okay.
Of
interesting.
All customer interviews and the questions we like a full recording of them, right? The transcripts, and try to build like the personas and what we should test, because we're trying to get on the same page as well. We're going to have a bunch of people doing customer interviews and what we've learned and what we should be building and testing and do it all at the same time. Yeah.
So I imagine the amount of input there is enormous. It's probably very hard to figure out like what is the thing to go after next. Yeah.
And of course, when the founders, right, they usually have an intuition of what it should look like and should do. We will kind of follow along of what they thoughts, the product should be like, and do experiments and that kind of thing. Yeah. So it's inputs are everywhere. Yeah. So as a team remotely, you have a couple of problems. One is to learn what the founder is thinking, learn what potential customers at least are thinking, and learn together as a team that kind of just get together the first time. Like, how do we work together? What is the technology we should use? Like, what are the things we should build? Like, make decisions on the fly. and trial and error basically from there.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you say like is the number one thing you've learned in the past month as far as like remote collaboration that you thought was like the most effective thing or the thing that other people should take away from your experience?
One thing I've learned, because we kind of, we grew a little bit of a team size, and we're no longer just a tiny, less than 10.
Right.
We actually, as we grow, I feel like, because when you're like 5 people, 6 people, you're really just doing whatever it doesn't scale.
Right.
It's unstructured, and as you go larger, you go more and more structured, right? And you actually start to think a bit more about remotes. And as a small company, though, you're not really at the phase where you're like fully structured, like everything pre-planned out. Everybody just do your own job, don't talk to anyone. Truly asynchronous in a way. We still somewhere in between. Right. So we're in between, and you also have a lot of people joining in the team and that kind of thing. I found pairing to be actually a really great way to do it, like pair programming. Pair programming
to like onboard people, or even just like as you move along. Like
as you move along, I think pair programming is actually a great onboarding, right? Because you're
which makes perfect sense. Yeah,
and that's what people do anyways, right? Even in people in person. You have onboarding buddy or something like that, right? To help you
go lurch over someone's shoulder and watch what they're doing, and like kind of get introduced to the code base and get your software environment set up and everything. I've really wondered, like, how did people do this today with remote tools? Like at CoScreen, we have a really obvious way to do that. We're onboarding people with CoScreen, but like, I've kind of thought that doing this in Zoom or doing this in other tools would be kind of difficult, like I'm not quite sure, especially because everyone's gonna be coming from different environments, especially if you have like, I don't know, it's just different kinds of programmers that are at different levels and such, and you're trying to onboard them with this very small team. So like how have you guys, like, how have you done your onboarding for the most part?
I mean, we didn't even know about CoScreen originally.
Right.
We started with just Hangouts, right? I mean, you use whatever tool you have.
You can find, you
play with it as much as you can. I think, the challenge of pairing is always, I mean, you're trying to get to know each other at the same time, trying to get to know how to work together on a particular problem. And you don't know where you're going to be running into, right? You might run into the bug, you might run into an issue, and you might need to scramble, both do some investigation and come back, right? And this is going to be a dance like that. Of course, using just Hangout and Zoom was painful. That's why I think even in the blog post I wrote, right, pairing with CoScreen helps quite a bit, because it feels like we can actually do things together in the same. I don't have to jump around.
That's our goal. Like we're using it every day. We're dog fooding it. We're trying to make it better and better for that use case. But we're a lot like you guys in that, like, we're trying stuff out. We're trying new things. There's so much complexity in this problem space, that people, I'm sure aren't aware of if they're just looking at it from the outside, from the veneer that's sitting on top of everything, right? But so it's really interesting to hear, like, how, because I mean, we don't really know how much of our, I feel like since COVID, like, our remote collaboration has been excellent within our little startup. And I worked remotely. I had a team in the Ukraine for years that I managed that, it was very, very difficult. There was all sorts of communication issues. I mean, a lot of it, I think it was just remote, because like I went to the Ukraine, I was there embedded for a while, and it was way different being in person. Right. And I don't feel as many of those issues since COVID hit. And I think it's a lot because of tools like Slack, tools like Notion, and all of these sort of asynchronous tools. But also, I think like that synchronous collaboration, like I never thought, I've always been an office person, right? I've always wanted to go to the office. I'll probably go back to the office even after COVID's done, right? But it feels like it's getting easier. It's getting easier to work remotely. Like it may actually be better in some ways, So I'm kind of wondering, like, what do you think? Like, as far as remote collaboration is concerned, like, is there anything you can see that's better than in office?
I think that most obvious to most people is that I can hire anywhere, right? Because before this even happens, like, yeah, originally Grid was a full New York only team. Like if you're not in New York, you can't join Grid.
Right.
Now all of a sudden we're not just in the US. We have a bunch of countries. I don't remember what the number is. I think at least more than 5 or 6 people from everywhere joining and able to work with the company. And you find talent globally.
Oh, right? Yeah.
If you're looking for somebody who knows Kubernetes, for example, there's a bunch of more people in Europe, right? And cost is lower, there's a lot more accessible talent and that kind of thing. And so I think the talent sort of like, you can have a higher talent density with a more reasonable cost, let's say. The joy of working.
So here's the joy of working from home. Yes, exactly. It's if a dog doesn't bark in the background or a baby doesn't scream, you're not.
Yeah, it's like a real. It's not a real setup, right?
Yeah, exactly. This has to be fake. It has to.
Yeah, they were peacefully just sitting beside me. I just hear something. But anyway, that's kind of one of the biggest advantage is that usually have a hard time hiring everybody in San Francisco, and how do you make progress? But now
it's like bringing down rent prices in San Francisco. I've heard it's actually which is awesome because it means people can live anywhere, people can work anywhere. You've got I don't know how many billion people in China and India and all these places that are probably have excellent engineering resources, and you can actually get in contact with those people. And Ukraine was a great place, but it was very difficult to communicate. The tools just weren't there at the time. I feel like the tools are starting to get there. So yeah, that's really interesting.
I think that's probably the biggest pros, right? I think of course benefits of working flexible. Some engineers really able to have more focus time, right? You can even be more productive potentially. There's definitely pros to it, but it's a two-sided coin, right? It's not all everything's great.
Yeah,
there's also challenges for
sure. That was going to be my next question. Actually, is what's the worst thing about remote collaboration in your opinion?
And I think it's going to be interesting to talk about this at a startup context, right? But this is true for everything. At a startup, you have a lot of serendipity, moments, right? The water cooler is what people mostly miss, and that's why you hear a lot of advice that, hey, startups should be built in the same place, right? You need to be in the same garage. You need to be in the same room to feel the magic.
That's how the Google's guys did it, right? So it has to be. That's the way it's done.
Quick turnaround. Everybody on the same page. You can eat lunch. You get to have this reports. I do agree that it's much harder to build reports remotely. Doesn't come as naturally. I think it's much more intentional. You have to actually set up time to get to know each other, not a work meeting only. You actually had to have one-on-one times to know each other. Actually sit down and just chat about.
What do you guys do for that?
We're still small enough to do this. We try different apps. One is called Donuts that does random one-on-one pairing every week.
That's cool.
So you just virtual coffee, but essentially the idea we just have to have a meeting that don't talk about work.
Right.
Intentionally don't talk about work. It's all we do is just chat. And
we have a bi-weekly team lunch where we all just kind of get together and talk, right? But I can kind of see the value of it being sort of this one-on-one, right? Where you're not even expected to talk about work, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's better that way because I think one challenge I've seen about remotes is that the same example you did, right? I think one obvious difference sometimes is the culture difference, right? Not everybody communicates the very same way, and not everybody has the same sort of idea of what should I be saying, what should not be saying, what is the way I should be, the way you actually type and put words into Slack or any tool you use versus how you speak. It's usually so different, and I've seen a lot of teams really tripped up about the culture differences of communication, right? There's
just from the remote engineers on their team, this person has a different culture than this person. Does it have to do with the area of the world they come from or the country or is it?
I do think so. There's this recent book, I think I forgot what it is, the Netflix culture book, right? Reed Hastings has a book that very famously talks about the culture differences within their company. and they actually ranked out all different regions, how they prefer to be communicated and what's your preferred communication style. And it's a drastic difference between Japan versus Germany versus somebody in Europe, somebody in US. What they some are much more blunt, for example, right? Some are much more reserved. Some much more never want to say all praises on public. Some much more want to say criticism in public. All these different styles, it displays differently.
Right.
If you're only using text to chat, because text can be pretty bad. And so you run into these situations where like, you don't just even not feel like you're close. You even feel like this person is not easy to work with at all.
Right.
I don't want to work with that person, even. So how do you, but at the end of the day, it's not really bad intentions. It's just the way we communicate through text is not, you can't see the emotions. You can't really see the intentions that easily.
So you may read into it something that's not there.
Yeah. And you have to kind of.
Whereas if you know the person, you've had that direct communication, then you know who they are, and you're going to read it with
and now you
intonation probably closer to what they intended.
Yeah. And now you can
understand.
Sense, oh, that person usually, even though
this guy's direct, but his heart's in the right place or whatever, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
At least he's you know why he does that.
Right.
So things like that nature, I feel like makes remote culture just harder, because now you have just communication styles differences, and also I think when it comes to like just working together, right? You don't really know what other people are doing, for the most part, right? You don't really get to see and have a lot of these moments where just chatting about, hey, I'm working on this.
Because if you're at work, you see them there working. You know what they're doing, right? That's true.
Yeah. Remote, you just don't know until somebody
could be off somewhere in the shower, just responding to Slack on their phone. They could be,
Yeah. So you
see the work that people get done, but I don't know. Work's never absolutely attributed to one person, right? So it's maybe sometimes hard to see, or to assign credit where credit's due, or to
smaller companies. You try to find people that aren't looking for credits. Of course, it's
that's true.
You want to,
but you're a human being. People want to be known that they not more than like, it's not just like here's money for this or whatever, right? People want to just be recognized. I feel like, right? Yeah. People want recognition. People want to know that they're contributing and they're pushing something forward. And especially in a startup, I think those are the kinds of people you want. People that really care that they're making a difference in the company. But like I can see how it would be harder remote to kind of to see.
Yeah. So it has to be much more intentional. Like everything feels. I can't remember who would say this, but it's pretty famous context now that, a remote company forces you to grow up faster. Like you have to do things that as if you're 10x or 5x size of a company. Like if your remotes, your communication has to be like almost your 100 people. Like
I haven't heard that before, but actually like that's totally true with CoScreen. Like we've jumped on so many things. Like, so I was one of the first engineers at HireVue, right? And we were all in a little dinky office, just like you said. Yeah. And everyone's right next to each other. And it was years before we set up, like something like Notion to keep a context of the company, or to have a company culture guidelines, or, set up anything to try, like a lot of the statistics we're taking, a lot of these things that we're intentionally doing to do team building and stuff. It definitely seems like you have to do that all sooner than later, or else you can't keep your team together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, our Notion is much more comprehensive than anything I've seen, even though we're a small company. And I think we're all kind of forced to write things down, like write proposals down for the engineering, write like best practices of maybe like even engineering resources to learn different things. What is the management style we're looking for, culture we're looking for.
Right.
The CEO has to write a lot more on different mediums, email, Slack, and different place, Notion. Just kind of read.
Do you think the time you're investing into that is distracting from engineering work or getting the product done quicker? Do you think it's costly, or do you think it's ultimately saving time in the long run? Or do you think it's somewhere in the middle?
I think you're definitely paying some short-term pain for that, or short-term time, effort, just to be able to write everything down. But it's always worthwhile writing down stuff,
Right.
because you're adding people. If you're a startup that's doing well, you're going to be adding people at some point, quite a bit. And it's usually really painful to transition from small team to fast growing team.
Right.
Like all of a sudden you have a bunch of people who've never seen or heard this code base, and it's spaghetti code because we've been trying 5 different things and
right.
written down, no comments. The methods, variables are just like all garbage.
Right.
You're like, okay, we gotta.
But it works.
Yeah. And so
nobody knows why it works, but it does. Yeah.
Yeah, and even reviews are like when you're sitting in person. When I remember, like, we were working in a small startup way before in person, the reviews are kind of like meaningless. We're working on it together, like,
Yeah, that's true.
No reviews really needed for GitHub. You just push code, really.
Right.
And of course,
if you're doing pair programming, right, it kind of does replace reviews to some extent.
Yeah, and you don't have to have somebody else to read it, and of course,
right.
then you're. I think it forces this paradigm of, I'm forced to be more scalable early. I think because now I'm writing out more. I have to have the same easy setup. You can't rely on somebody peeing chat all the time. The setup, development setup tools have to work, right? The quality of the tools has to work, because otherwise somebody will be blocked 5, 6, 7, 8 hours later when they wake up.
Yeah.
Like it's the consistency is more guaranteed now, or it has to be guaranteed now within the teams in terms of toolings and communication.
And you don't want to be the one that broke something at the middle of the night because you didn't have a CI system, right? And so you don't even know it broke, and then somebody in the morning has to fix your bug, and then you get the nasty gram in the morning.
Yeah, the team, we're all in the office. If it broke, just come back tomorrow. We'll fix it together, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I was at Pivotal Labs a little bit, right? They're doing full pair programming, right? And they literally have a schedule. They start at 9 or something like that. Ring a bell. Everybody go and sit down, pair program. Ring a bell. Everybody go eat lunch.
It's like kindergarten or something. It's like pair programming time, kids.
And the nice thing they said is like, hey, now nobody ever opens up their laptop to work at night. Everybody just comes to work. Everybody knows they're going to deliver. Everybody knows, like, to them, it's a pros. Well, I don't have to. There's no like working, extended hours at all at Pivotal because we all work together. Nobody works alone. Everybody has there, and you have this productivity sort of, way of doing things.
I love Pivotal. I used Pivotal Tracker back in the days and stuff. Yeah, it's awesome. But
so I think now in a remote setting where 24 hours somebody is using some tools and you're pushing code all the time, you have to make sure how do I get everybody up to speed? Like everybody can debug something, everybody can actually fix something.
Nobody's blocking anybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to be a little more self-sufficient because if you're not, you're gonna have a little harder time, like getting
a completely ineffective time. You're not going to get anywhere, I would think.
Yeah. So I think remote also forces really junior hires more difficult. I think.
Right.
That's probably more true. And if you have a college grad or whatever junior definition is, like hasn't really worked that much at all and can get stuck really easily. Usually this kind of setting, especially in a smaller company, it will not. Usually doesn't work.
It's gonna select for more people that are self-starters, really.
Yeah.
I've met junior engineers who are great self-starters. That they will dig in and find a way to move forward regardless of they don't wait for somebody to ask them to get started. And I think that kind of personality. Now you've got this bigger talent pool. Maybe you can find more people like that. But But you're right. Like that onboarding, I kind of get the feeling. At CoScreen, we very deliberately have not really hired any junior engineers. We've had that luxury to do that. At some point, we're going to want to, and I feel like we're going to have the infrastructure built up, hopefully, to support that. Yeah. But I don't know.
Yeah. So your infra actually is forced to be built much better. And it's interesting. I think Grid probably has a much more better infra than I even see in larger companies.
Right.
When it comes to like, setting your own environments up, because I guess we're just forced to. That command has to work, and we just keep making it better and better.
Right.
to set up our whole dev environments. And
So at HireVue, we just threw more people at it, right? We had this massive, DevOps team, 20 people or something that could go and just boom, go after, we had server deployment scripts, but they never worked. So they would deploy a server and then you'd have to go out and like manually, fix stuff and things like that. But it was okay because you had this huge team supporting it, and it's like, you don't really have that luxury in this 24/7 all remote world, right? Everything has to work all the time. And it makes perfect sense that you kind of, all of this maturing early, it probably will pay off in the long run. I hope, right? I'm thinking like a year or something, once these companies start growing, maybe there will be less growing pains, so it'll help us get where we want to be faster. I guess.
Yeah. But, I think it's, as you scale though, as a remote company, you also scale in terms like, I think you also have to change quite a bit too. The tooling is one thing, but I think communication is still the hardest part.
Yeah.
Right? How do I make sure everybody is on the same page? How do I make sure the morale is high? Right. How do I understand everybody is able to trust each other, right? And think this is a good place to be? How do I even make sure somebody read a very important thread,
So is that, are you doing that through like one-on-ones? Are you doing that through
for now,
Notion, through like, how do you actually stay on top of that? I could see doing it with a small team. It's hard for me to imagine how you scale it out.
Yeah. And that when you scale, that gets really interesting. I think everybody does different things in this case, right? You need somebody still, especially when it comes to communication, to be on, to own that,
right?
To how to even distribute a very important message to everyone, right? To make sure maybe they have something they need to do. I don't know, upgrade the security or do or something like that. It's really hard actually. All the tools are actually quite hard because there's not much of an acknowledgements or like a feedback loop in most of these we see. So it is a quite common challenge I found to be in a remote setting. It's all manual. Somebody echoing basically on repeats and just echoing over and over to try to make sure everybody kind of acknowledges some certain message. And the same thing for founders. I realized in startups, in a remote setting, you find yourself on repeats more often through messages and through video calls, just on repeat more often about what is the things we're looking to do or looking to achieve, and just remind everyone more often, I think. Yeah.
All right. So this is obviously a bit self-serving, but I genuinely like to know how you guys have been using CoScreen internal to your team to help you develop software remotely. Yeah.
So CoScreen, it's we started basically just with pairing. Whenever we need to pair a program, let's say, hey, CoScreen is a default tool we'll use. We'll jump on. I think most of us use Visual Studio Code actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Visual Studio Code actually has remote
stuff in it. Yeah.
Stuff in it, but like I said in a blog post, like we have the Amazon UI to open, Docker logs to look at. Sometimes monitoring tools open. A bunch of like different.
So you don't have to think about all these different things that you're going.
Yeah, like I have to in VS Code, I can only see each other's editors.
Right.
Which can only go so far.
We thought about doing an integration for VS Code, so you could do like the video and share other windows, but then have some awareness or some link to be able to get in and do the collaboration through VS Code with it. So
I
think that would be a good addition.
Yeah. I think that would be interesting. So basically, we pair program together. We have different modes. One is pair programming, where you do the more traditional pair programming where one person drive, right? And some other person kind of watch, and you take turns, that kind of thing. More often, a lot of times, we will also pair when we're debugging something. And that's very common. Like, hey, you had an issue, I don't know, you can't launch the product, for example.
Right.
Okay, let's pair CoScreen, open it up. You have your code and the UI in one place, and I have my code, and I can kind of compare and contrast, and maybe I'll send to some monitoring tool, and we can just or the cloud built-in monitoring stuff too. We just going around different things, and you can kind of have one person open up their UI where they're stuck, and you can open yours, and you can compare notes. And CoScreen is like so natural. Like I can click on their, terminal and start typing things. Like, oh, which commit are you in? Like what problem? Do a Docker logs or Docker PS, right? Or Kubernetes.
If they're an Emacs user, like, would you be able to navigate their editor? Would it? No, I'm just kidding. I'm like, I mean, that's a big problem. Is that I think the way you're using it is kind of more natural. Is you have these two editors, right? Because people don't always agree on their tooling, right? And actually, I think that's kind of a strength to let people use the tooling that works for them. And like you say, compare the tooling, right? You're not always going to be working in someone else's tooling. Not everyone's going to be using Visual Studio Code. And, it'll work out if you guys have this connection point between those two things. But a lot of times you don't, right? And so I think being able to sort of cobble together the solution that works for you is really what we're aiming for.
Yeah, we have people who use PyCharm. We have some people. I use some from time to time as well. I try to learn more VS Code just because everybody uses VS Code. In our company. But end of the day, I still open up Emacs because sometimes it's the easiest way. If I
you're Emacs user, so I'm a Vim user, so it's
okay.
we have an Emacs user in Germany, Robert. So that's a common thing for us to kind of be in this. Our Holy War shows up in CoScreen because I have my Vim open and he has his Emacs open. We're there, and neither of us can use each other's editors, so it's
I'm sure.
At least not competently use them. So
it's interesting, but it's in CoScreen, at least you can open up your screen. They can see it, right? I can navigate my own. They can and use yours. Theirs. It's just the context switching. It just feels like you really live sitting on the same place. Typing on the same laptop.
So I think that's like when you're in person in an office, somebody's looking over your shoulder. Like that was something we would do a lot. It was almost like a war room scenario. Like you say, something's broken. Like this was particularly true. Like if there was like a server that went down or something, and everyone needs to get behind, and everyone's looking at one guy's screen, right? It was very awkward actually sometimes, But and then somebody be saying, go to this Splunk log, go to the chat and link it in and stuff, And I feel like. That could obviously be dramatically improved using better remote collaboration tools. It could almost be done better remotely because you just have everyone can work within their own context. It's like you said, like when you run into a problem, people kind of want to go off on their own. Maybe they don't want to work on the problem together because they'll just kind of butt heads on it. Sometimes you do, right? But a lot of times you kind of are like, well, this is too much for me to talk about at the same time. I want to go off in my corner and work on it, and then we'll come back, and having I don't know.
The moments I haven't been in an office for a while. The moments I remember,
do you even remember?
Back in the days, right?
Back in the old days.
You stand up, take your laptop to whoever the war desk is, or war room, or whoever's desk is the war room. You sit down next to it. He will be like looking at logs.
If your company's cool, it has a bar. You can go hang out in.
And we're like, sitting down and typing and just like figure things out and just doing this bouncing of exploration together. Basically, CoScreen I think gives you that of a way to kind of see.
At least closer to that than you're going to get, I think, through any other.
I think so. You can actually share your screen or not share your screen, right?
Right.
You can actually type in anybody's terminal. And you can move your mouse around. You can do a bunch of things kind of feel like together without having to figure out how to, man, Zoom is just like, I have to
are you sharing? Could you click on that?
Or more per.
I've got to restart. Yeah.
I have to it's just so painful.
That being said, Zoom's video and audio quality is awesome. It's probably unbeatable, but, and it's a massive, massive company. It's definitely it's amazing how quickly Zoom has caught on, in this remote world, and I think, I feel like there's room for other tools out there. There's room for other things beyond just this personal face-to-face conversation like we're having right now. This is the water cooler conversation that you're going to have. We're not working together. I don't know if it's like it seems I don't know how much you're using Zoom and such, but it seems like every time I'm in Zoom, like I'm kind of forced into this conversation. I'm not working at the same time. And maybe you can try to like jury rig it into doing that, but it's always been very difficult in my opinion. Like I get focused on the video. It's so big, it's so prominent, it takes over your whole screen. You just get sucked into it, I think. So I don't know.
Yeah. I agree. And I mean, Zoom or Hangouts, really, in the end of the day, it just feels like it's kind of the default tool people kind of just start and use, but
right.
You don't really even experience something different or better. And until I was CoScreen, I was like, wow, does something even exist? Is it even possible? Like it's like this wow moment. Like I didn't even know I can type another.
It scared some people, actually. Some of our users, they're like, yeah, I don't know about this. This is scary to me. But yeah, I think some people are like, this is amazing. This is super cool. And some people are like, this is really strange. I don't know what's happening. But I don't know.
People getting used to it. But I think at the end of the day, once you kind of get into it, you can't live without it. I really feel like so. CoScreen allows you to be, like I said, literally sitting in the same room remotely, and not such an easy way to get in. And and once you start using it more and more, you kind of even have like your own patterns.
Right.
Like, oh, we're doing CoScreen again. My screen is here, your screen is there.
Right.
You kind of just like you get used to it. You don't even think about it. Like you have a particular flow in CoScreen of how you do debugging and development together.
So everyone knows, like, why is your window on the left this time? It's supposed to be on the right.
It's we don't even talk about it that much. Or hey, you're the one. You should expand. You should put your font size at least large enough, and we can all start partying on the same IDE.
Right.
I think there's actually a lot more possible. I feel like that we can help this whole remote setting to be even much more natural. Yeah.
Right. All right. So to wrap up, what are you most looking forward to in 2021?
From CoScreen or
just from anything in the world.
We finally got over 2020. I'm just hoping
it's just a number, man. Like
Well, I think maybe it's just a number, but we're just all hoping for vaccines to come. We just all go back to normal. I think I'll be still working remotely regardless, but at least you have the option to.
Yeah, I hope so too. Actually,
fly to New York to see them. I haven't seen anyone in person like at all. So that's kind of. I think I'm just looking forward to having a bit more normal options. Yeah.
Right. So, like, do you think that that's going to happen, or?
I think so. Although
I don't feel like I can hope anymore after 2020. I just feel so beaten down that but I do have hope too. I hope, just like you do, that everything goes back to normal.
I hope so too.
Or whatever the new normal is, like.
Yeah. But that's probably a good point. What is the new normal? And to me, at least I feel like if I can have the option to fly, right, where I can get to see each other, you actually have the option. But day to day, we're still going to be working.
Hey, there's people that are just doing it anyways, so.
Yeah. And I do think it's new normal, right? Yeah. I don't think every startup will be always going back to sitting in the same garage anymore. This works. I really think startup can be done remotely. So I think this is going to be what people will be doing.
I mean, like, we tried to find talent in, for a previous startup I had, Silverview, and we were limited to the Salt Lake City area here, and I could say it was much harder to find very talented individuals than it has been now with this big net. I don't know how much of that is people that were laid off from COVID. I don't get the idea that like the tech industry is really, like, had a great deal of attrition from COVID. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it definitely feels like, I don't know if it's like CoScreen's a good idea, so I'm getting more people that are jumping on board, or, but like we've gotten just incredible engineers, and so, I think you're right. Like in the long run, like the benefits maybe outweigh the negatives, and maybe that's not true for every, I would wonder, like for HR or for marketing or for, like that's probably not true for almost any other segment of a company, but it certainly seems to be true for engineering. I don't know.
I think so. Well, engineering is more easier transition, I think. But I do think at some point in the future, we should be able to figure out how to do all the other functions remotely. If we have a lot more density of remote companies, I think the tooling is going to get
better tools, right? I think that's it. Is that there's obviously a massive amount of work to be done in the tool space around this that nobody's even thought about. You know, like we've just barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, so. Benefits, right? You know, how do I do icebreakers? You know, how do I get to know each other in morale events? What does that mean? You know,
right.
You know, all of this has to be figured out, but I think we're going to get better as a whole, and it's actually going to be an exciting wave.
I feel like we're better now than we were at the beginning of the year. You know, so if we just continue on that trajectory,
CoScreen, right? I mean, I do think it's a huge step, one huge step ahead to make it even much more interesting to do remotes with this tool.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, man, it's been great chatting with you, and thank you for taking the time to do this with us, and I hope to chat again with you soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Adios.